It stopped. Didn't it do this last time? Go
Yeah, it
live.
did this last time. I don't understand why it's done this again.
You're...
Technology loves me.
So, evening everyone. Very smooth start to the stream once again. Um, Andy,
uh,
could you please do a quick sound check? Can everybody hear us? Can everybody see us now? Because obviously the screen briefly went
yes.
went black.
Test. Hello. Hello. Test.
Oh gosh. So that did actually happen last time, and clearly we didn't learn from it.
I don't know what it is. It's the live streaming software is just not a fan of me.
I get the feeling it's the video that we use at the beginning, the little countdown. So it was very close,
It's
but
all right.
yes, the screen
I'll
went
take the
black.
blame. It's fine.
Yeah, okay, you'll take.
I'll
Oh,
take
there
the
we
blame.
go.
It's fine. It's fine. It's good.
So anyway, on with the stream. How are you doing tonight, Andy?
I'm very well. All the better for being here with you, Nat. How are you
Oh,
doing?
I know, I'm very good as well. Very good as well. It's been a while since we've had you on stream, so
It's
I
been
do
a while.
enjoy our little streams together.
Yeah, it's been a long while. Been too long. Too long. I've
It
missed
has
everyone.
been. Oh. Now, for anybody that's missed your previous streams, obviously this is episode 3. This is the third time we've seen you with this particular stream.
Mhm.
Could you give everybody a quick recap into what you've been doing and what you're going to be doing tonight?
Yes, absolutely. So first off, Moggy, resistance is futile, um, and I'll run through what we sort of briefly did. So we decided we were going to make the arch from Bourneville Station,
Hmm.
and so in the first episode, we spent some time gathering a couple of images of reference material and putting them into a program called PureRef. And then we proceeded to model it in sort of like a basic form, but this is what we came out with. Um, and then episode 2, after we had spent the time modeling, we then gathered all our texture reference and we textured the model. So this is what it currently looks like in the game. With some of the textures, like this sort of grate up the top here,
Hmm.
we spent some time cutting out alpha channels as well. So everywhere where there is white, it will display as transparent, and everywhere that is black on the model here or on this grate will display as opaque. So that
Hmm.
gives us a nice sort of transparent grate, so we're not using a load of geometry to create the grate, it's all just done through texture work. And today I'm planning on getting the light bake done, which will give us
Hmm.
our ambient occlusion, so it gives the sort of soft, subtle shadows. I briefly spoke about them last time and how they work. Rather than the legacy engine itself having to try and render any dynamic lighting, which it can't do. So this basically does all that work for us.
Just before we go on to the rest, apparently there is a slight echo from your voice, which I think your voice might be coming through twice.
Ah, okie dokie. How about that?
Let's
How
give that a
about that?
try.
Test,
So
test, test, test.
hopefully that'll work. Now, obviously, yeah, Andy's voice is so nice we can hear it twice. That is exactly it. And apparently it's much better now.
You flatter me. My apologies.
It's all right. I mean, it took me a while to get used to pushing all the buttons as well. Especially when you know everybody's watching, it is a perfect time to push the
Oh,
incorrect buttons.
oh, putting the pressure on me.
Um, so obviously this has taken us into episode 3 now, which is roughly about 3 hours to create this little archway.
Hmm.
Um, how long would you traditionally spend on that? Say if you weren't streaming and you weren't going through it and you weren't showing everybody the steps you take, what kind of time frame would something like this normally take you?
So something like this would tend to be part of a station. So I'd be making the whole station as a whole. To make this asset on its own, we had all the sort of textures and stuff from before because I'd already previously made this asset. But if I was to do it from start to finish, just this little asset, I could probably do it in sort of about an hour, the whole workflow, I reckon. So taking it from model, finding all the textures, making a little texture map, bringing it through to the light bake, and then getting it in game. I'd probably do it in about an hour, I would say. But
I actually, if I remember correctly, in the first stream, you actually claimed you were going to get it done in one episode, and that didn't happen, did it?
Yeah, I blame chat. They distracted us somewhat. It's not my fault, I swear.
So, before you get on with continuing to create this asset, for anybody that's in the chat that perhaps hasn't been following this from the beginning, you can watch episode 1 and 2 on the YouTube channel, and then you can either watch episode 3 live now, or you can come back to it. So, Andy, over to you.
Okie dokie. Well, let me take us through to light bake. So we have our model. We have our textured model. It has all our textures applied. So now what we want to do is we want to take this out of this max scene. I have a scene already set up. Bear with me. I'm just going to drag this one over here. Don't want to, expose anything. Just make sure my tabs are in the right place. Okay.
Getting everything organised.
Yeah, getting everything organised. Okie dokie. So, okay. We have our arch. Now, our arch is coming a little bit funny here.
Yeah, that's not what it looks like.
That is not what it looks like. It is coming wonky. So it looks as though this asset, for some reason, has come in flipped. So I'm going to go quickly back here. I'm going to go on the arch grate. I'm going to affect the pivot, and I'm just going to center that. And that should hopefully... I'm also going to reset X-forms, which basically just cancels out any coordinate information that it may have stored on the model. And we're going to give that another quick go just to see if it comes in as expected now. So let's have a little look and we'll see what happens.
So do you have that happen quite often where it doesn't, where it copies over sort of awkwardly?
Not particularly. It can be a bit of a common problem if you haven't sorted out your pivot points, and if you haven't sort of reset your X-forms. If it's holding on to previous coordinate information, then it can cause it to go a bit skew-iffy. But that's not something that happens terribly often. Okie dokie. So we have our model in our light scene, which should unhide all. No, okay. I'm gonna hide all this.
And then also for anybody that, obviously we didn't really introduce you very well at the beginning of this stream. So for anybody that doesn't know you, what do you do at Dovetail, Andy?
So my name is Andy Thompson. I am an artist level 1 working on the Train Simulator franchise, the legacy version. I am the main station artist for Train Simulator. So a lot of the stations that you see in Train Simulator from Cross City onwards have gone through me in one way, shape or form. I've either made them or I've dealt with outsourcers who've helped make them, or I've dealt with people in the company who've helped make them. So I'm sort of the end point for the stations going in game into Train Simulator is currently my job. We're a bit of a jack of all trades on Train Sim, the legacy one. So we all sort of pitch in and do a bit of everything. But don't ask me to do any coding because I don't have a clue.
Right. So next time we need to ask you to do the coding, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Right.
So,
One thing I have totally forgotten to do. I've totally missed a step. What
oh,
I need to do first is I need to unwrap my model. I got so caught up there. And
also, I don't know if it's possible, but it might be worth making my face a little bit smaller, only because when you open anything or move my face, because on the top left of the screen it hides some of the stuff people can see.
okay, bear with me. Let's go.
Maybe put me down bottom right.
There you go.
Yeah, yeah, that'll do. That'll do. Look,
Fantastic. Okie
look at me
dokie.
go.
Woo wee. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to unwrap our model in under the second channel. So what this basically does is this gives the computer to a 2D plane to figure out where the 3D geometry is. So by that I mean it unwraps it. If you imagine how a seamstress works with clothing,
Yep.
they use templates. And so those templates they can then be bent and manipulated to create a 3D object. And what we are doing now is we are taking all that 3D information and turning it into a nice flat image that will give the modeling software an idea of how to take that 3D ambient occlusion information and put it in a 2D texture plane, which the engine can then read.
Okay, yeah.
So you want to ideally get a nice, fairly condensed texture, which it looks like, yeah, this is about as good as we're going to get. Yeah, I don't think it's going to get much better than this. Okay, so that's what we need to really do there. And then we'll collapse that, and I'm going to re-export it again. Here we go again.
So there's a lot of exporting.
There is a lot of exporting. It's a lot of backwards and forwards, testing things, troubleshooting, making sure things are working kind of as you intend them to work, fixing problems. So there is a lot of backwards and forwards between scenes. Okay, so I'm just going to drag on a nice, totally blank white texture. We want the texture to be all the same color because this will allow 3ds Max to read the no sort of color. It's not going to bring any color through. It's going to give us a really nice contrasting image between the values of 0 and 1, so black and white. And we don't want it. We want it to go that full range, so we get as nice a sort of shadow map as possible. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add it up to 3. I'm going to select the second channel where we unpacked all that ambient occlusion information. I'm going to add a output here. I'm going to go with a complete map. So I'm not sure why, but we go with the complete map. I think this
Every
gives
time?
pretty much every time.
Okay.
I think it gives you the full dynamic range, but don't hold me accountable for that. I'm not entirely sure.
Yeah, I won't.
In the target map slot, we're going to go with ambient color. So this is why we have used a nice full white material, because it's going to use that color as the basis and then run all the way down to black for our darkest shadows. Just for sort of as high quality a shadow map as I can get, since we're just making this one asset, I'm going to go 1024 by 1024. That's a 1K texture. Normally, with something like this, you would only need 512 by 512, and that should get you all the quality you want. But since we can afford a little bit extra because we're making this individual asset, we're just going to go with that. So once all that's done, then we hit render, and this will set Max off on its merry way, rendering out all of our ambient occlusion material. So this basically takes all the different objects that are part of all the objects that are part of the whole model, and it will
Yeah,
render out separate maps for each of that.
the ones we saw earlier, they were sort of like they were in red and green mesh almost.
Yes, yes,
Yeah,
yes, yes, absolutely. So I'm just going to open up Photoshop briefly.
sure. Roy Henderson's asking, how long does it take to make what you're making? I think you answered that earlier, didn't you, Andy? Traditionally, it takes you about an hour to make something like this, but you make it as part of a larger asset, right?
Yes, yeah. So I normally I don't make or I don't necessarily always make the individual assets, something like this, which is part of a station. I will make as part of the full station model. So this will come in as a part of the station model. But with something like this, if I was to make this as is and run the full workflow, as I said at the start, it would probably take about an hour, I would reckon.
Moggy said probably a lot quicker than having to explain it to us. Yes, I do believe explaining it to the chat is where time comes in, but that's
Yes.
the whole point of the stream.
Yes, yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Let me just grab those maps now. So we have. Here we go. So I'm just going to drag all of them in.
That's fine.
And now we have all of our shadow maps all in one. So now what we want to do is we want to make it so they appear. All the shadow map information appears in one map. So because we've got all of these layers, just merging them together wouldn't do anything. We're still going to get the top one just displaying. So we want to utilize some of these different layer options in Photoshop. I'm just going to use lighten, and this is going to allow all the white information to filter through the black background we have, and compile all as one. And then I can merge them all down.
Do you have some of them like crossing over others there? Is that a problem?
No, so we shouldn't have any because I have flattened it out as is. So where it looks like it may be crossing over others is where the modeling software has rendered a little bit extra around the outside of where the 2D template actually is. This is to allow for any sort of bleeding effects when the texture is being displayed on the model. So if you had it really, really tight and up to the absolute wire on your UV maps, you would probably get the background bleeding through because it allocates a little bit of sort of soft edgeness with the texture displaying on the model. So that's why they might look like they're overlapping a little bit, but when we put it in, they shouldn't be.
Yeah. So like from where I'm sat, obviously looking at the images, it does look like they're overlapping, but I guess they're not.
Yeah, no, they shouldn't be. If they are, we can always go back in and manually adjust the UV maps a little bit, and move them about a little bit.
Crown Blades asked, how long would it take to make an entire station?
An entire station? It really depends on the size of the station. So if we're making something like in West Coast Mainline, which came out last year, Watford Junction, which is about 11 platforms large, if I'm remembering rightly. Might be a couple of extra larger. That took a good 2 to 3 weeks, I think, at the time. I was a year less experienced, but it still took a decent amount of time compared to
that's a significant amount of time.
Yeah, compared to something like a 2-platform station with maybe no station building or anything, or maybe a very simple station building, that would probably be a 2-day job. So it really depends on the size of what you're working on. Okay, to just let you know what I've done here, so you might have seen me, whilst I was answering that question, drag a big white layer across the entire thing.
Yes, I did see you do that.
Yeah, so
What were you doing?
So what I was doing is I'm adding a little layer of light. So even though we get some nice shadow maps from 3ds Max, Some of them can be where it goes to absolute darkness. That can be way too dark and doesn't really display in engine properly.
Okay, yeah.
Because nothing is truly sort of like totally pitch black a lot of the time, unless the lighting is, you know, there's no moonlight, there's no nothing. Sometimes you get pitch blackness, but there's always a bit of bounce light. And so by having something display as pitch blackness, it looks visually odd, because you'd still be able to see the color on, say, the top rim of the lamp, even though there's not much light getting in there. It wouldn't be sort of pitch black. There would still be you'd still be able to see it. So this is just to stop any total darkness, so we can kind of fake a little bit of bounce light.
Okay. So we have a couple of questions from the chat, if you reckon you can answer them.
Fire away.
Shall I? Fire away. Okay. So Roy Henderson's asked, can you keep all the pieces and make a copy if you need one? I imagine that's from what you've got at the moment.
Yes, kinda, yeah. We've started, or the past few routes, we've started kind of working like this, where we will, or I mean, my the sort of the big boss, Derek. Yes. You may all know Derek.
I think everybody knows Derek.
Everybody knows Derek. The way he works, because he's been doing this so long, he knows what he's made and roughly where it is. So you can go back, and there's no point in reinventing the wheel, as he always says. So you can go back, you can grab chunks of mesh or model that you kind of want to reuse or repurpose. I've made this before, I have the texture map. The model maybe needs slightly updating. I'll take the old model, I'll add some extra geometry in there. There you go. You've got that sort of brand new model.
So you can get the desired result without having to put quite as much time into it, because you've basically got the skeleton of what you need.
Yeah. So with stations, for example, where we run across a sort of route, a lot of the time you find with, especially the smaller stations, and especially in places like Germany, they use a lot of very similar. Not architecture, that's not the right word, but sort of cluttery bits. So end platform points, lamp posts, shelters, sort of like waiting rooms. They're all kind of the same. A lot of the time it's just sort of modular things that they've built in a factory, and then they take it where they kind of need to. So we can reuse shelters. It's like once you've already made the shelter, you've got it, you can put it in the new station as well. So we can kind of build a bit more modularly like that, and just sort of repurpose the assets. It's not like we have to build the asset brand new for every station kind of thing.
That's handy.
If that makes sense.
And then the next question we've been asked is, if the arches and shapes are overlapping, if you add, would this bypass the whole of the background?
If the arches and shapes, so what we have on the screen right now.
Yes, that's what we have on right now.
Just get a little drink of water.
That's all right. Talking is thirsty work.
It is. It really is. So if I was to have, say, for example, I'm just gonna do it for you. I'll resave this. I'll save this in a second. So if I was to say, for example, have this overlapping this bottom bit down here. Don't do that to me. It would cause the geometry that uses this bit of texture map to then display what has been sort of dragged over it. So the reason we flatten it is because each individual bit of geometry needs to use its own space for texture space. And if you were to have something overlap it, you get a weird sort of looking shadow map that would look kind of broken. And you tend to be able to sort of spot, oh right, okay, that's where the problem is. You can open it up in Max, display the texture you've got, and see where the issue is. You can either rebake or just go in and fiddle a little bit. Right, let me save this out.
And Rekiozu TV is asking, do the shadow maps make a huge difference?
A massive difference. A massive
How?
difference. So I'll use the sort of example that I used last time. So if you imagine, say I have my trusty sort of portable hard drive here. Um, as you see, I put it down on my hand. The underneath gets a bit darker, and there's a shadow. There's a shadow that runs round sort of underneath.
Oh, your hand's not
This
on the screen.
My hand's not on the screen. There we go. How's that?
That's better. That's
A
better.
little bit better. So
That's good.
you can see under here there's a sort of shadow that kind of runs around the base a little bit. It's quite subtle, but you would notice it. If that shadow wasn't there, I don't really have a light to hand. Actually, I'll tell you what, I can grab my phone lamp. If the light wasn't there,
Yeah.
there we go, kind of like that. It would look like that, even though there would be no sort of reason for it to have that sort of light underneath.
So it would just look too bright.
It would look too bright. It would also look like it wasn't grounded as well, because things are naturally
Right.
going to have shadows where they meet other objects, and the light from the sun can't get to it, or not as prominently as it could, say, for example, something that was facing the sun directly. So it makes a huge difference because it adds that level of realism that
Yes, it makes it look
striving
more
for.
realistic.
Yeah, it makes it look
Yeah.
much more realistic.
Yeah. And Wolfboy's asking, how many artists work on one route? Does that depend on the route and how much, like how large it is, or is it the same team every time?
So in-house, we have for TS1, the legacy product, we have myself for the stations. We have an artist called Mark for the vehicles, and we are the only two dedicated artists for Train Simulator legacy product. But we use a lot of outsourcing, as a lot of the other artists are working on TSW. So we use sort of outsourcers, ex members of the company, people who have been really passionate fans of the product and have sort of modded and made things themselves. And that outsourcing depends really on the size of the route, depends how much we need, the sort of time scale we have. If we have quite a short time scale but the routes are decent size, we need to maybe use a few more outsourcers. So it kind of varies depending on the size of the product, like you said.
Yep. Yep. All right. So continuing with what you're doing, what's the next steps from here?
Okie dokie. So the next step is we are saving out our texture right now. And then this, we can go back into our asset here. And then what we're going to do now is I'm going to go into each material. And in this second slot here is what will be reading our ambient occlusion map. And for this, I want, let's see if I can find it. Wherever it's run off to.
Roy Henderson has asked, do you have to ask permission to design a train?
Right, okay, so yes. Because Dovetail uses primarily licensed products, if not only licensed products a lot of the time, we have to get permission from the company directly because we are making a representation of their product. And so I believe we are one of, if not the only licensed train simulator. There might be one coming out, I think. But
I am not 100% on that one, so I'm not going to confirm anything without knowing that for sure.
No, fair enough. But yeah, we have to get permission because we're recreating their train or their product. As well with if I make stations and I'm using say for example I'm using a British Rail logo, we then have to send that off to British Rail and get them to confirm, yeah, they're happy with the colors that we've used. We've represented the colors accurately. We've represented the shapes accurately. So it does need sort of confirmation because we get licensed.
When it comes to getting permission like that as well, how often do you find you need to make edits based off of feedback you've been given?
Um, we're fairly good on TS1 at getting the detail that we want and represented accurately fairly quickly. So there's only ever a sort of a couple of occasions that we've had, hey, you need to go in and change this a little bit.
Hmm.
I can't speak the same for locomotives.
Yep.
I think Mark gets a decent bit of feedback, but again, I that's not really my side of expertise. I can only really speak from the station side.
Crownblade has asked, how much realism do you put into the creation of assets? Like, do you look at the measurements for carriages, for example, and adapt it? Now, I think in the first one, you demonstrated quite well how realistic you tried to make it, but have you got an answer yourself for that?
Yeah. So, excuse me. With in regards to stations and the
Yes.
routes themselves, we use fairly accurate coordinates based on Google satellite imagery. So we'll have the Google satellite imagery laid along for the length of track that we're using or for the route we're using, and then we will use that imagery to figure out where things go, where things get placed, and we try and get them sort of as accurate as we can. The legacy tools are a little bit more tricky to get things really, really accurate, whereas compared
Yeah.
to TSW, the tools are a lot more finite and they can get things a bit
Yeah.
more accurate. Obviously, when it comes to levels of detail and detail levels, we have to do things based on kind of the amount of time that
Hmm.
we have. So we have commercial constraints, and we have to work within those.
Yes.
So we can. This is why we've sort of started working in a more modular fashion, where we will build a nice, detailed asset, and that we can reuse multiple times. So we're not having to go in and do that
Hmm.
detail over and over and over again, and we're saving time and still getting a high level sort of a detail. Locomotives, yeah, a lot of it is used from sort of blueprints and stuff. So we'll get
Yeah.
basic blueprints from the companies that license us, um, and we'll be able to model based off those blueprints, which are accurate to a couple of centimeters, I think, if not tighter than that. Um, so we try and get it fairly accurate and fairly detailed.
Um, and obviously, you mentioned that you touched briefly on like reusing some assets. Um,
Hmm.
this what kind of assets do you reuse? I mean, for example, you're not going to go put in this archway where it doesn't belong.
No.
So what kind of ones are you able to reuse?
So ones such as let me I'm just going to search for something. Ones such as sort of modular shelters. If you look at
Yeah.
a train station, especially if you're in the UK and you've been to a station and you see the um, kind of like stainless or brushed steel shelters that they've recently started adding around the place, or around sort of renovated stations. They are reused pretty much everywhere. So we can make one of them or a bunch of bits that make up different sized ones,
Hmm.
and we can reuse them. So things that are used consistently, sort of lampposts, shelters, benches,
So,
those
so,
sort of
so
cluttery
nothing
bits.
that would impact anybody's experience. So you wouldn't go put in something where it didn't belong.
No, no, no. We try and avoid that. Depending on okay, that's perfect. Sorry about that. Depending on our level of reference,
Yeah.
um, we try and be as accurate as possible to the real life representation. If our reference is a bit lacking, then we will try and, based off of our personal knowledge and
Yep.
maybe limited reference, we will try and sort of fill in the blanks how we think they would be filled in. A lot of the time, we're fairly lucky with reference. And with people such as Duncan Seeley, who went out for the cross city route for us and got some
Yep.
fantastic reference, um, that we were able to pretty accurately recreate the stations. But with
Um,
places like Germany, the sort of Google Street View, their privacy laws are very different in Germany, so it's a bit more difficult
yes.
to get accurate Street View sort of images and stuff for good reference.
Um, Generic account name has asked, does the beard enhance your amazing modeling skills? I certainly hope it does.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, without this, I would not be the wizard that I am.
Ah.
I hope that answers your question.
All right. So, you've gone back to the asset. We were on the shadowy stuff. What are you doing now?
Yes. Okay, so what I've done here is I plugged that shadow map information that we had into the second slot here with the emissive map, which is what should make this little lamp glow. I have put a blank shadow map in, which is what I was sort of faffing about with there, trying to find it.
Yeah.
So this is basically just a totally blank texture because we don't want the glowing light to be displaying. It's not going to have any shadows because it is a source of light. So we want that shadow map information to be totally blank, so it looks like it's radiating light rather than sucking light in. So now what I'm going to do is, now that we have all our shadow map information, we are going to take it into game, or hopefully we'll take it into game. So I'm going to export it now.
Is this where it could all go horribly wrong?
This is where it could go all horribly wrong. We shall find out. So
Let's
what
hope it doesn't.
well, fingers crossed.
Yeah.
So I am going to use a Railworks intermediate geometry file, an IGS file, and this is what we primarily use to export from the max file into our in-game file type. So this will then convert the IGS into a file type called an XML, which is a readable file by the game engine. But yeah, this is how we get it out. Okay. So I've exported a few things. Now, I tell you what. I will try and open it up. I will say I know some stuff is wrong.
Okay. Now, is it incorrect on purpose?
Maybe.
Maybe. You can tell people if it's incorrect on purpose.
Yes, there are a few things that are incorrect on purpose. Now, I'm sorry, I can't show you the blueprint editor that we use. There is some information that I cannot disclose on there. So I will describe what I'm doing. So what I've done is I've gone in, I've found that IGS file that we had, and I've created an XML file with that. Now all that is just a quick right click on the IGS file, and we can create a scenery blueprint. That will then render an XML file for us, which will give us names, display names, and all the kind of information that we might need for the model in the blueprint editor. All I tend to do in regards to sort of changing things in here is I change the category. This allows, when you're, say for example, you're in the build menu and you're building your own route, you'll be able to find the categories on the left. This is how you allocate those categories. So it's by setting the category in the blueprint editor that you'll be able to find it in the certain menus that you want it. And I also changed the render components. This is just how the game engine will render the model and its level of details. So I set the highest level to 10 and the lowest level to 10. Don't ask me why we do that. Derek told me to do that. I follow his rules. He is more experienced than I.
Moggy's just said, I'm now intrigued by the blueprint editor. I don't know what it does either. Of course you are. It's because we're not showing it to you. It's
absolutely.
It's the one thing you're not allowed to see. So naturally, it's the thing you want to see most.
I'm terribly sorry, Moggy, but I shall not be obliging you this evening.
Now, while that's all showing up on your screen, HD Shinks has asked, what are the first steps the team takes when creating a route after having all the in real life information? Do you guys start at the point A and go to Z, or do you start halfway through the route?
So the way that we tend to run is we will have a track layer come in and lay all the track. They will run from point A to point B, and run using the Google satellite imagery that we have. That will then allow the route builders to come in and then start adjusting terrain and start placing roughly where sort of towns and villages or buildings need to be built. Excuse me. They will draw a little bit on the terrain so they can allocate what outsourcer is going to be working on what section, or what colleague is going to be working on what section. And then whilst that is sort of in the progress, we will then have the platform lofts placed. This will give us a rough or a good indication of how long the platforms are, what height they're meant to be as well, and we can extract that information with the track, with any sort of surrounding terrain or roads, for example, any sort of surrounding lofts, and then as the station builder, we can then take that information into the modeling software, and that should then give us a good start point that we can build placeholder models. So that basically is just rough dimensions, rough sizes, so we can block it out, put it into the game, and then the route builders know at what point they need to build up to before the art asset that we're creating bespoke comes in.
Yeah, based off of what you've just said, so Nick K in the chat has asked, how do you get the correct scale? Is that something that's set at the beginning? So that's actually like a really good question. So obviously, how do you not make it the size of a skyscraper? How do people know what size that asset needs to be?
So I predominantly use measuring tools on Google Earth. For a top-down view, that gives me a good width and length. Say, for example, if we're talking about a building, I can get rough sizes off of that. In regards to if we're looking at building, if we're looking at stories, I tend to do an average story at 3 meters high. That can vary depending on the building type. But Google is very, very, very handy, because Google can give you a lot of information for places like Reiser Bahnhof that I spoke about on my first stream with you, Nat. You can go into Google and you can find out and a building such as old as that, you tend to be able to find sort of measurements on Google somewhere. But we use a lot of standardized sizes. So I have an app on my phone that gives me standard sizes of stairs, standard sizes of bricks, that sort of varying information that makes figuring things out, if you don't have the information, much, much easier.
Yeah.
So I'm going to just push this forward here, because we have a shadow of an arch and nothing
we
much
do.
more.
We just have a shadow. It's just a random shadow.
Yeah. So the fact that there is a shadow here means that the model is coming in fine. Fine. However, there is something wrong. Tends to be with this issue. There's something wrong with our naming convention in the model.
Okay.
So with naming conventions, as I spoke about it the first time, you have to use this kind of naming convention. So we have 1 underscore, 4 digits, underscore, and then your name. After that, you can then put something like underscore night, and that will be a piece of geometry or a texture that will only display at night. So the 1, this is our level of detail. This is, say for example, this was a much more complex piece of geometry, and had loads of bits of geometry. As you're getting further away, the player is not going to notice that detail. So we can then use a tool called the mesh. What was it called? Mesh. I can't remember. It basically mesh thing.
Yeah.
I can't quite remember what it's called. That will basically optimize the geometry, squish it down, sort of take out half the geometry, if not more. So whilst you're up close, the model might look much worse, because things are like, there's not a nice smooth curve, there's a really angular curve. But as a player, when that level of detail comes in, you will be a certain amount of distance away, and you will never notice that because there's not enough pixels to see something sort of 300 meters in the distance, adjust an arch to with 10 bits of geometry to three bits. And this is where this second section comes in, 0 to 50 here with the arch. That is the distance at which this level of detail will display.
Right, I see.
So that is set to 250 meters at the moment. It's probably too far, to be fair. As well, the other ones are way too far as well. So we have them set at 400 meters.
Is that just for the sake of this example?
This is for the sake of the example, yeah. But that's what that sort of naming convention will deal with. So I can see here already we have art1_arch great. So we have it's not deciding which distance to render this at. Excuse me. Sorry. So we want to add that in.
Roy Henderson is asking, what software do you use? I think we answered that in the first one, but please do refresh anybody.
Yeah, of course. So I predominantly use 3ds Max myself for my modeling software. In regards to textures, I will use Photoshop, and that's how we compile sort of old legacy textures. With the product like TSW, they will use texturing softwares such as Substance Painter, Substance Designer, and that whole Substance package. But it really depends on what you need, because we don't have we don't have something they call PBR, which is how can I not remember what that stands for, that acronym? Physically based rendering, that's it. Physically based rendering. And what that is a much more realistic way of rendering textures. So it will give you height information. So if you can see, let me see if I can get it. I'll go back to my trusty external hard drive. So there's a sort of texture on here, and in sort of real life, there's little dimples in this all the way along, really, really tiny. And we can display that in the texture just as sort of color information, so we can make it look as though there's fake little dimples in there. But if you were to go up close and then sort of look at it the side, it would just look like the flat bit of geometry we have. Whereas with the physically based rendering, that texture information makes it look as though it is adjusting the geometry, so it will look very, very bumpy, and adjust the height information. So yeah, we use a slightly different workflow, just due to the age of the engine, but you still get fairly nice results.
Yeah.
Okay.
So where are we up to? What's happening?
We have all of our bits of geometry with the right names. The distances are probably not great, but they will do for this. So I'm just exporting that out. We've got a nice export complete. Everything looking nice and fine and dandy. And then I'm just going to relaunch it again.
Looking pretty.
And we're going to click play and let it export again. Oh, fantastic. Okay, so all of our texture information is missing. Which is why we are now getting missing textures.
Really weird looking. It's like, those do not cross police tapes. That's what it looks like.
So this is because it is looking for texture information in the folder that we are currently in, that doesn't exist because the texture information is elsewhere.
So it's shouting at you.
So it's shouting at me, where have you put these textures? I need them. So I'm going to go in and I'm going to quickly grab these textures.
So was this an intentional error you wanted to show people?
This one was not intentional, but this
one wasn't even intentional.
Fairly easy to fix. It's because
you should have said yes.
I should have done. Because when I set up a test folder in the blueprint editor, that is in a certain subcategory of folders in our development folders, and these are, as you can see, sourced on the desktop. So I just need to drag them in to our correct folder, and then we should be good to go.
Moggy said it's a deliberate mistake. It is.
Yeah, Moggy, it's a deliberate mistake.
This was planned.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm glad you all think so highly of me. Okey-dokey. Bear with me. I will just do a few clicks.
Matt K said, I'm assuming this is how you make maps, and is it the same for the train models?
Yeah, so it's very similar. The train models, because they are the focus of attention, will use some slightly different shaders that I necessarily wouldn't use in a station model because they're maybe a bit more performance heavy. And if I'm doing it for the whole route, it will just sort of cause some frame rate issues. But with the train, because there are only a few of them or select ones, you can use them. But yeah, this is primarily the same. You could apply this workflow to both stations and locomotives. Okie dokie.
So where are you moving the textures now, yeah?
So I've moved the textures over. I'm afraid I'm having to drag this away just so I don't reveal any information.
Spoilers!
Spoilers. We don't want any spoilers. So I'm just rerouting the path here, and this is where the software will look for the textures. Oh, and I forgot to drag over the shadow map.
Oh, after you spent so much time on it as well.
I know, and I forgot to drag it over. How could I? Drag that over, and then that should... Oh, wait, we want the blank one as well. Where are you?
Have you lost what you're looking for now?
No, no.
Sure about that? You sound
Yeah,
really
no,
confident.
it's fine. Don't worry. We it's fine. Yeah, it was all intentional. It's all going according to plan.
Sure.
Right. Let me just source to that. We should be good to go. I mean, it's good because even though I'm making these sort of mistakes, a lot of these are common mistakes and common issues that people tend to have when making models. So it shows you if there's sort of if something's not working quite how it should, like where we had the missing model or where we had missing textures, it will show you sort of what the common reason for them not working is. Okay.
It's actually it's quite good to see the mistakes, not to put you in an awkward position, but so that everybody can actually see where it can go wrong and where perhaps some of the hurdles are when you're creating assets.
Absolutely. Because I mean, even though I've been working on TS1 for just under 2 years now, I still make mistakes as well. So even if you're making something yourself and you make mistakes, don't beat yourself up about it. There will be a reason why it's not working. It may not be obvious to you to begin with, but the more you make, the more you create, those mistakes will get much easier to fix and diagnose.
Yeah. I imagine when you first made them, it took ages to fix them, and now you can do it relatively quickly.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it took me... Oh, let me just re-export this again. I think my first station, which was I believe it was a 2-platform station, took me about a month to finish. And nowadays, that's something I can do in about 2 days. So,
which is crazy when you think about it like that. That's nuts.
Yeah, so it just more and more practice and understanding the workflow properly will make it just speed up the whole process massively.
And obviously you're quite confident now and you've been doing it for a while. Does it encourage you to help new people who want to learn how to create assets and stuff like that because you remember being in their position?
Absolutely. I like to think of myself as a very empathetic human being. And if I see a sort of learner driver on the road, I remember being in that position. So there's no benefit to pushing your way in front of that person because they're probably as nervous as we were when we first learned to drive. So yeah, I love teaching people to create and make new things if I can help in any way,
Yeah.
because that just advances the whole sort of community.
Yeah.
We all learn together. So this is why I was more than happy to do some streams. So as you can see, we have the arch kind of in game, but there are
Oh,
a couple of
how?
things that are
Yeah.
wrong.
Okay, that's weird. So how is it on? It's only showing up on one side.
Yeah, so it's only showing up on one side. So I'm going to quickly run back into Max here. So the issue was arising with our detailing arch map.
Is the bit at the top as well was only showing it at one side? So like,
Yes.
oh, okay.
Yeah. So what we have, what I haven't done is I haven't added a transparency. So this will basically allow the texture. If it has an alpha channel, it will allow the modeling software to read, oh, you've got an alpha channel, I will process that information then, which is something we hadn't done. And I also hadn't clicked on two-sided. So this will allow textures to display on both sides of a mesh, whereas if you have a mesh, the light color here is your is the front facing bit of geometry, and then the dark facing is the rear facing, which tends to not display at all. So I'm going to quickly double check the detail. Did I leave? I did. So what I'm going to do quickly before we go on any further.
Did you make a mistake?
I haven't made a mistake. However, I have realized that there is going to be a little bit of an issue. So I'm just going to duplicate these sections where we have the rear nameplate, because if we have that displaying on both sides, we are just going to have reversed lettering, which is not what we want, ideally. So I'm going to go in and I've set up another little bit of texture space under Arch Detail where it has no lettering. So we can just drag it down to the section we need. I'm just going to marry it up as accurately as I can. It might not be quite spot on.
We'll forgive you just this once.
Thank you. That should be fairly close.
Mr. Quicko Stream said, "Hello Andy, you make my TS experience very good. So all I can say to you is great, but thank you for what you have done for TS." It's very nice.
Well, thank you kindly. That is very nice of you. That's very nice. It's one thing that is always incredible to see is the reviews after we've released a route. And as much as we get sort of negative reviews,
mixed.
Yeah, sometimes we get mixed reviews. Sometimes we get really positive reviews. Even having the negative reviews are very handy because I like to learn from the criticism. And what have we done wrong? What can we improve for next time? What do people not like? What do people like?
Oh, absolutely. I always encourage the community to give us both critical and positive feedback, because it's all useful. We need to know what we've done wrong, what we've done well, but we also need to know if we've done anything wrong and what we can do to continue improving.
Absolutely. And it's incredible to hear when people like our work or like my work. It's incredibly flattering. So yeah,
that looks awesome now.
So now we have an arch with two sides. We don't have it's a little bit. Okay, so I know where this is. It's another common issue that we have. Forgive the stream being a little bit choppy. I think my computer is struggling a touch.
It's okay, it's allowed.
So as well, before I go in and quickly adjust why that model was flicking off, I should be able to go day and night, and then we have a glowing light as well.
No, really?
Yeah, there we go.
Oh, that's awesome.
There we go. So it might look like, oh, it's not displaying any light down here. So what we have is the route builders will then come in with light object, and that will just display a beam of light onto where they select it. So it's not quite dynamic lighting, but it looks kind of dynamic, and that we'll use for nighttime. But yeah, that's our little asset. I will go in. I will quickly show you why it's a very, very quick fix.
Yes,
Excuse
please
me.
do. Show us the fix.
Why the asset might have been disappearing. So if you find this with one of your assets, it could just be that your geometry. I'm going to use reset xform here, reselected. It could just be that your geometry is holding on to previous coordinate information, and when you're moving around, it thinks that the bit of geometry, say you've set it to 250 meters, it thinks that your bit of geometry is absolutely miles away all of a sudden, and it will remove it. So hopefully this should remove any geometry information. Make sure you remove all your layers of X information. If you've done that, export selected, back to Bourneville Arch. Okay. This is not always the fix, but hopefully it will be for this one.
Hopefully this time it will be.
Hopefully this time it will be. Okay. So it's export succeeded, and there we go. And that has fixed it. Now we can do a nice little pan around.
That's awesome.
And there we have it. Our Bourneville Arch for you all, ladies and gentlemen.
So hopefully, with you showing how to create this and the 3 episodes that we've done, it will have inspired some people to give asset creation a go for themselves, even if it's not necessarily for a train simulator, but just if they have an interest in it. And if anybody's thinking of giving the asset creation a go, what would be some very basic beginner's tips?
Beginner's tips.
Any advice, basically?
Don't beat yourself up if your model doesn't look like how you want it to. Work on getting your workflow sort of figured out. So whilst if you want to make sort of game ready models, I would say YouTube is a fantastic source for ideas on how to be optimal with your geometry, because if you're making an in-game object, you have to be fairly optimal with your geometry. But this sort of series has been fairly handy for the full workflow for Train Simulator. But like I say, figure out your workflow. So even if it's something super basic like a box that you then texture, and then put a ambient occlusion map on it, or if you're doing it for a bit of more of a modern engine, you're figuring out all your other texture information, take it into game and get it all the way into game, because then you can know your basic workflow and you'll be able to sort of expand on each little level as you learn and progress even more. But it's the same with drawing. Practice.
Yep.
And you will get better, as much as it may not feel like it. Just stick with it, and you'll look back at yourself in a year and think, oh my gosh, did I make that? That's rubbish. Yeah. And you will keep getting better and better and better. So stick with it. If you really want to do it, trust me, stick with it, and it will pay off. It will pay off.
Well, thanks for showing us how to make this asset, Andy. Now, hopefully we'll have you back on the stream again, because it's been an absolute pleasure. Obviously, this is episode 3, but we could start from episode 1 again with a different asset. So if anybody in the chat has something they'd like to see Andy make, please do let us know. Andy, do you want to give us a quick rundown of what you can make and what you can't make? For example, are you able to make locos?
No. Locomotives, no.
Are you able to make stations?
Yes, that will take a lot longer though.
That would take a lot. I mean, considering
than just a basic asset.
This one took three hours.
Yeah. Anything you can see in an environment, I can make, minus locos, vehicles, people. Think things that populate an environment.
Yeah. So going forward, if there is something you would like to see Andy make, please let us know, and we'll try to get it done. So thanks for your time tonight, Andy.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. I've enjoyed it.
It's always a pleasure.
So for the rest of the week, tomorrow we have the Tuesday night pub quiz with JD. That's on Twitch only, for anybody that wants to participate.
Ooh,
I don't have any idea.
Is there going to be beer?
Pub quiz. I mean, you could bring your own.
Oh, nice. Sounds like a good
Bring
pub
your own
quiz.
beverages. Yeah. On Wednesday, we've got Workshop Wednesday with Jamie. And then on Thursday, we have the first preview of the Boston Sprinter for Rush Hour, which will be really exciting. I get the feeling that's going to be a
Oh,
bit of a popular one.
oh, the hype is
Yeah,
real.
it is. Woo. Right. So I think that's about it for tonight, isn't it, Andy?
I believe so, yeah. That
Yeah.
probably caps
So
us
thanks to
off.
everyone for joining us. And again, thank you for your time, Andy. It's been an absolute pleasure. And it's really nice seeing it from scratch to where we are now.
Yeah, yeah, you can see
Yeah.
the full workflow now. And I believe you can find
So
it all on YouTube, all 3 episodes, isn't it?
yes, you can. They are episoded 1, 2, and 3.
There you go.
Yeah. So it's good night from me.
And good night from me.
Bye everyone.
Goodbye. Have a nice evening.